Why the Pacific Northwest coast lacks major urban centers. The Pacific Northwest, encompassing Washington and Oregon, is home to thriving urban centers like Seattle, Portland, Spokane, and Eugene. Yet, its Pacific coastline, stretching from the wild Olympic Peninsula in Washington to the scenic southern shores of Oregon, remains conspicuously free of major cities. This absence is not a random occurrence, but the result of a complex interplay of geographical, climatic, historical, and economic factors that have shaped settlement patterns in this stunning yet challenging region. This article explores why the Pacific Northwest coastline, despite its natural beauty, has not fostered large urban centers, drawing on insights from the video, Why the Pacific Northwest Coast Has No Major Cities, while rephrasing and expanding the content for a fresh perspective. Geographical barriers. The coastal range as a natural fortress. The Pacific Northwest coastline is defined by its rugged and dramatic geography, setting it apart from the sandy beaches often associated with coastal regions. From the northern reaches of Washington's Olympic Peninsula to the winding shores of southern Oregon, the landscape features rocky headlands, secluded coves, and towering sea stacks sculpted by millennia of oceanic erosion. The Pacific coastal range, including the Olympic Mountains, forms a formidable barrier that isolates the shoreline from inland valleys. These low but rugged mountains, with their steep, densely forested slopes, create significant obstacles to transportation and infrastructure development. Unlike the Cascade Mountains further inland, which support major cities like Seattle and Portland, the coastal range acts as a natural fortress, limiting access to the coast and hindering the movement of goods and people essential for urban growth. This isolation is exacerbated by the region's geological activity. The Pacific Northwest lies along the Cascadia subduction zone, where tectonic forces have uplifted the coastline, creating dramatic cliffs and rocky shores that are difficult to navigate. For early settlers, building roads or railways through this terrain was a daunting task, often undone by seasonal washouts caused by heavy rainfall. In contrast, inland regions like the Puget Sound in Washington and the Willamette Valley in Oregon offered flatter terrain and navigable rivers, facilitating trade and settlement. The coastal range's barrier effect has thus played a pivotal role in directing urban development inward, leaving the coast sparsely populated. A harsh climate, relentless rain and wind. The climate of the Pacific Northwest coast is a defining factor in its lack of major cities. Characterized as a modified oceanic climate, the region experiences cool, wet, and windy conditions, particularly during autumn and winter. The proximity to the Pacific Ocean, combined with the orographic lift caused by the coastal range, results in extraordinary precipitation levels. For example, the whole rainforest on the Olympic Peninsula receives up to 12 feet of rain annually, far surpassing the 40 inches seen in Seattle, just 75 miles east. This relentless rainfall, coupled with strong westerly winds and persistent cloud cover, creates a damp, gray environment that, while lush and verdant, is often inhospitable for human habitation. The constant dampness and limited sunshine pose significant challenges for agriculture as crops struggle in waterlogged soils, and construction requires weather-resistant materials and frequent maintenance. The coastal climate also fosters a sense of isolation, with stormy conditions and rough seas discouraging maritime activities. Inland areas, such as the Willamette Valley, benefit from a rain shadow effect of the coastal range, enjoying milder, drier conditions that support fertile agricultural lands and more comfortable living environments. This climatic disparity has historically pushed settlers and development toward the interior, where conditions are more conducive to urban life. Historical context, Indigenous adaptation, and European struggles. Long before European explorers arrived, the Pacific Northwest coast was home to thriving indigenous communities, including tribes such as the Chinook, Clatsop, Tillamook, and Makah. These groups skillfully adapted to the region's challenging environment, leveraging its abundant marine resources and temperate rainforests to sustain their livelihoods. However, a catastrophic event, the 1700 Cascadia megathrust earthquake, a magnitude 9.0 event followed by a devastating tsunami, severely impacted coastal populations. Anthropological estimates suggest mortality rates of 30% to 95% among indigenous communities, a tragedy preserved in oral histories. This disaster significantly reduced the coastal population by the time Europeans arrived in the late 18th century. European exploration, driven by the search for the Northwest Passage and the fur trade, began in the 1770s with navigators like Captain James Cook and George Vancouver mapping the region. The Lewis and Clark expedition of 1805 to 1806 further documented the coast's rugged terrain and harsh climate, establishing Fort Clatsop near the Columbia River's mouth. Their journals highlighted the region's challenges, shaping perceptions that favored inland areas for settlement. European contact also introduced diseases that further decimated indigenous populations, disrupting traditional ways of life and leaving the coast sparsely populated. These historical events set the stage for limited coastal development, as early settlers found the region's conditions less favorable than those inland. Early settlements, battling nature's challenges. Early European settlements along the Pacific Northwest coast faced significant hurdles. Astoria, established in 1811 by John Jacob Astor's Pacific Fur Company near the Columbia River's mouth, was strategically positioned for trade, but struggled with logistical challenges. The Columbia River, notorious as a graveyard of the Pacific due to its treacherous entrance, posed significant risks to maritime navigation, limiting Astoria's growth as a major port. Other coastal outposts, such as Coos Bay in Oregon and Aberdeen in Washington, emerged as small hubs for logging and fishing, but failed to attract large populations due to their isolation and lack of infrastructure. The absence of deep-water harbors along much of the Pacific Northwest coast further deterred maritime commerce. Unlike California's San Francisco Bay, which provided a sheltered, accessible harbor that fostered urban growth, the Northwest's rocky, storm-battered shores were less accommodating to large sailing ships. Early settlers found greater success in inland areas, where the Puget Sound's protected harbors and the Willamette Valley's fertile lands offered ideal conditions for trade, industry, and agriculture. These early struggles underscored the coast's unsuitability for large-scale urban development, reinforcing the preference for inland hubs. Economic factors. The allure of inland opportunities. The economic disadvantages of the Pacific Northwest coast are perhaps the most decisive factor in its lack of major cities. The coastal range's barrier effect restricted access to the interior, where resources like timber, fish, and agricultural products were abundant. Building infrastructure across the rugged terrain was costly and often unsustainable, as roads and railways were frequently damaged by heavy rains and landslides. This lack of connectivity stifled the economic viability of coastal settlements, which struggled to establish robust trade networks necessary for urban growth. In contrast, inland regions offer compelling economic advantages. The Puget Sound, with its deep, sheltered harbors, became a hub for port cities like Seattle, Tacoma, and Everett, which thrived on trade and industry. The Willamette Valley, shielded by both the coastal and Cascade ranges, provided fertile land for agriculture, supporting cities like Portland and Eugene. These areas benefited from navigable rivers, such as the Columbia and Willamette, which facilitated trade without the risks of direct coastal exposure. Today, the Pacific Northwest coast is home to just 600,000 people, approximately 5% of Washington and Oregon's combined population, compared to millions in Seattle and Portland metropolitan areas. Modern implications. A preserved natural legacy. The absence of major cities has preserved the Pacific Northwest coast as one of the most pristine and beautiful regions in the United States. From the Olympic Peninsula's temperate rainforest to Oregon's Samuel H. Boardman Scenic Corridor, the coastline's natural splendor attracts tourists, hikers, and outdoor enthusiasts. However, the same factors that deterred urban development, rugged terrain, harsh climate, and limited economic opportunities, continue to define the region's character. Small coastal communities persist, often centered around tourism, fishing, or small-scale logging, but a lack of infrastructure and the allure of inland hubs ensure that major urban centers remain absent. The contrast with California, which boasts major coastal cities like San Francisco and Los Angeles, highlights the unique challenges of the Pacific Northwest. California's milder climate, accessible harbors, and gentler terrain facilitated urban growth, while the Northwest coast remains a testament to nature's dominance over human ambition. This preservation of wilderness offers a unique opportunity for reflection on the balance between human development and environmental conservation. Conclusion. The Pacific Northwest Pacific coastline, while breathtakingly beautiful, has remained free of major cities due to a combination of rugged geography, a harsh climate, historical disruptions, and economic disadvantages. The coastal range's isolation, relentless rainfall and winds, the devastation of indigenous populations, and the allure of more hospitable inland areas like the Puget Sound and Willamette Valley have all shaped this unique settlement pattern. Today, the coast's sparse population and preserved wilderness stand as a testament to these enduring challenges, offering a landscape that is as captivating as it is resistant to urban aspirations.